So now we're going to talk tight ends, guys. And it is weird to say in 2023 that the wide receiver class isn't that great and the tight end class is incredibly deep, but here we are. So the same deal here. We have we have Pete's tight end rankings, but he's gone off to do HQ, but we'll incorporate them into our aggregate rankings. So we all average these up, gave our grades, and we'll just start at 5 and go from there. So at 5, Rick had this young man ranked 5th. Me and Pete had him ranked 4th. Lige had him 3rd. Luke Musgrave, tight end, Oregon State, missed a large part of the year with injury.
Yep.
We talked to him at the combine, Rick, and he is a multi-sport athlete, including downhill skiing, I think was one of the sports that he excelled at. Played lacrosse as well, and Rick has some experience in lacrosse from his family ties. And I would imagine there's some transition there, Rick, with lacrosse and football, especially in the skill position.
Yeah, no, the hand-eye coordination, the feet, everything you have to play in lacrosse. Usually you don't realize that you have to be a really good athlete to play lacrosse, and that can translate over. And I asked my kids, you can either play soccer or lacrosse when they were growing up. And they said, you mean we can actually hit someone in the head with a stick? Well, I said, you can't hit them in the head with a stick, but you can cross-check them while you're running up and down a football field. So they decided to go that route than soccer, although I'm a huge soccer fan. But
yeah, by the way, Lige might be the biggest Premier League fan here. He's a Man City guy. So
oh, bandwagon.
What? No, I was a fan before they had the money.
Just so you know, Lige, Rick sat in the Arsenal box a few years ago, so he's
ecstatic right now. Don't worry, you guys will choke like you always do.
Oh, okay. I like Chelsea, but I was a Tottenham guy. Traded jerseys with Harry Kane when he came over, and met Chelsea people. Terry, who was a can't remember his first name.
John Terry.
John Terry.
Yeah. Aston Villa. We hosted Aston Villa at our facility.
Oh,
they came and used the practice facility. So Fulham, who is owned by Shad Khan.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the Khans.
Yeah,
that's right. Hey, Rick, let me ask you quickly. Do you think a professional soccer player can successfully kick field goals in the NFL, or is it too different?
I watched them when they were screwing around on the field. No, it's different. You would have to train.
Injury. I mean,
just so you know, Ryan, the soccer ball is a little bit more round in appearance than a football.
How would you describe a football? What shape is that?
Is it oblongated?
People always say oblong.
Lige, I've been on the road with this man for 2 months. That's all I'll say.
And he can't wait until the draft is over.
I'm so glad Rick brought up that soccer point, right? Because I played soccer all the way up until 9th grade, right? And as far as footwork, and when I, have kids, that's literally, I'm gonna tell them the same thing, Rick. Like, even if he wants to play football, I'm like, play soccer first, right? Play soccer first. It's going to get your footwork down. And I think that does translate to what, Luke Musgrave has done, even though he played lacrosse. Bigger body, tight end. That's one thing about this tight end class, Ryan and Rick. I mean, these guys are big. There's some big tight ends in this draft class, and there'll be starters in rounds 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And before I get into that, Rick, I do want to ask you this side question, right? As an evaluator, when you see a class like this, does it push guys down the draft board for you at tight end because you can get a really good guy later on in the draft?
I don't think, in my opinion, I think it's almost like the running back class. I think you're going to get great value from a running back on Saturday as well. Correct. But that's the question. Unless you think there's a Kyle Pitts, which I don't see a Kyle Pitts in this class, that – you look at your draft board, and let's say you're looking at the defensive tackle or the interior defensive lineman, which I don't think is a very elite class. And if you have a tight end, let's say you have Mayer, and this is just an example, I don't know this, and let's say you have Brzee from Clemson, and they're both in the same area of your draft board. And as you're looking at your draft board, when you look down, after Brzee, there's no one for the interior defensive line. If you look after Mayer, there's 10 more guys. So I say, let's take the one need. We got a under tackle need. Let's take him because there's nothing after this pick. As long as they're equal on your board in ability for their position, and then Mayer, who we like too. But I've got 7 other guys that I can swing around and get in the second round that we like as well.
So Luke Musgrave, tight end, Oregon State. I think he's a late first, early day 2 guy. That feels about the range. I don't know if he goes high. I don't think middle of the first round, but we'll see. Sometimes there's surprises. I'll give you the comp, Rick and Lige, and you can do with it what you will. Dallas Goedert.
Not bad.
That's not terrible. Because he's
you want mine?
I think
Yeah,
he went in the second round, right? Dallas went in the second round, right? Yeah, with Luke Musgrave, he's not gonna knock your face off, but he's a willing blocker and big target in the red zone and deceptive speed. I would say you talked about earlier, Ryan missed a lot of this past season, but we got a chance to look at him at Senior Bowl a little bit. So I think early second round is probably his sweet spot. Like I said, I had him third. I think you guys had him a little bit later as fifth. I just like his size, his ability to stretch the field, and then being able to be a willing blocker is what I really liked about him.
So he does not like Ryan. Ryan said something about his mustache on stage, and I thought he was going to kill Ryan.
He was not happy. No, I was offset and I wasn't paying attention.
Ryan is not as funny as me. People don't get his sense of humor compared to mine. So
or handsome. I'm not as handsome either.
Yeah, I'm on the show just for eye candy and my sense of humor.
Oh my God.
So I rushed on set, Lige, and I was sitting next to Luke, and I mentioned you did so and so at the combine, and I meant to say Senior Bowl. And I think Rick, as he always did, corrected me. And I said, sorry, Luke, I got distracted by your mustache. And it was like,
straight face.
Like going on. I was like, all right,
like,
man.
what you trying to say?
Yeah. But here's the thing. So Luke is measured in at 6'5" and 7'8". He's almost 6'6", 253, ran a 4.61. I mentioned Dallas Goedert. Who's your comp, for Luke Musgrave, tight end at Oregon State?
Well, I'm going to go way back in the day. I'm going to go back to 2003. There was a tight end that came out of Iowa, Dallas Clark.
Oh, that's a good one. And by the way, Dallas Clark is bigger than people give him credit for. I thought he was like 235. He was like over 250, I think, when he came out. He was a big player.
He got smaller in the league.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what happened? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. I like that. And a team that I think it's a good fit for Luke, it would be like the Cowboys, for example. They got rid of Dalton Schultz. They need help at tight end. I mean, if you take him at 26, is that too early? Maybe not, especially if you can get Dak back on track and CeeDee Lamb's going into, what is he going to, year 3, year 4? And you would think that offense, we'll see if it takes a step forward without Kellen Moore. We'll see how that goes. All right, number 4 on the list. Rick and Lige both have this guy ranked 4th. I had him 5th, and Pete, who's no longer here to defend himself, Pete Prisco had him 2nd.
I bet Pete had him high.
Yeah. Pete,
he's shorter because he's shorter. That's why. He's shorter than the other tight ends.
This is one time I'm going to agree with Pete. This guy keeps growing on me the more and more I watch. The way he worked out at the combine.
All right, hold on. Let me give you his name first.
Pro day.
Go ahead. His name and then you tell us. Yeah, Sam LaPorta, tight end out of Iowa. And Rick, I'll just say, one of the things that I fell for with Josh Palmer coming out of Tennessee is that I said he doesn't look like he can play. And as a scout pointed out to me later, he had a terrible offensive situation around him. So you have to be able to see through that. And Iowa's offense stunk. So, Rick, go ahead. Tell me about Sam LaPorta, tight end out of Iowa, 6'3", 245, 4.59.
Yeah, he ran fast at the combine. And I don't want to say we're sitting in draft meetings. Let's not create a monster out of him.
Yeah,
but he is a very good football player. I think he has to work on his technique as a blocker, but I loved his tenacity, at least to try to finish, because I think he gave better effort than some of the other tight ends that we'll talk about as a run blocker. I think he's quick-twitched enough to separate in underneath routes. I think a few drops that were concentration drops to me can be cleaned up, but I think he has good hands. He is very good at the bad ball, since he had a lot of bad ball drills with the quarterback play at Iowa this past year. And I think he doesn't get enough credit for his athleticism after he makes the catch. But I think this guy, and I'm not going to say this, I'll tell you, one person I talked to at a pro day thought he was a poor man, George Kittle.
All right, Lige,
Same
you're
school.
up.
Same school, so it makes sense, right? Tight end you. I'm like you, Rick. He's growing on me the more and more I watch tape. I mean, Ryan, you spoke about it. Horrific quarterback situation at Iowa. I mean, you turn on that Ohio State tape and you're like, oh my, like you almost just want to turn it off because of the quarterback
that was,
at Iowa.
It
was
40,
bad.
It was like 40 offensive plays. They were so bad.
It was bad. It was really bad. And to your point, right, Rick, the athletic ability, they split this guy out like a receiver. They run not just tight end screens to him, like receiver screens to him out in open space. Very savvy and shifty in the open field. He's more athletic than you think he is, right? And I think it happens to a lot of safeties when they're guarding him. They don't realize how athletic this kid is. And I think he has H-back skill set as well, too. And I love this willingness to block, even though he's not the biggest guy. He'll fit it up in there. To your point, Rick, he needs to work on his technique a little bit more. But I always take a guy that's willing to do it than a guy that shies away from it at all. So I think he can be a complete tight end. I could see the comparison to a poor man's Kittle. Kittle definitely a better blocker. But as far as the receiving,
but Kittle wasn't a great blocker coming out.
He really wasn't. I had him his rookie year. He got a lot better than he was his rookie year. So I think LaPorta can grow in that aspect, right? But as far as receiving and run after catch, I could see why you put the comparison between him and Kittle.
Yeah, and he is an expert. He must have caught 250 out routes because that's the only thing the quarterback can throw besides the tight end screens.
I think all the tight ends we're going to talk about here in this top 5 list are basically late first, early day 2 guys. If you feel differently, certainly let me know. If you think one goes higher than that, maybe someone later in the list will. In terms of a good fit, and Leger, tell me what you think about this. I had him going 42nd overall in the 3-round mock draft a few weeks ago to your New York Jets to help out whoever the quarterback is. I'm assuming it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. You're making a face. You don't love it?
Well, I've heard a lot of mocks, potentially having a tight end there, but I'm like, I really like Jeremy Rucker. I think he can grow into that offense. And let's not forget, they still have 2 other, tight ends in Uzama there. And Tyler, I like to call him Gronklin, but Tyler
I like it.
Played really well last year too.
Yeah, Conklin's my guy.
He's a really good player. So I've heard a couple mocks, mocking a tight end to help Aaron Rodgers, but I'm like, I think they have 3 really good tight ends already. I don't think that's what the Jets need.
And you know what? That's a good point because Luke Ruckert was drafted last year. I think last year, right?
Yeah, Jeremy Ruckert. Yeah,
Jeremy, excuse me. And came out of Ohio State as a pretty good football player. And you didn't see a whole lot of him last year, and people just tend to forget about it.
He was hurt in the beginning of the year, so people forgot about him.
That's right. And it doesn't mean he can't play, and they're not going to just blow a draft pick on a kid and then move on unless there's something else going on we don't know about. So that's a good point to remember.
And both of those other veteran tight ends are only going into their 2nd year of the contract that they just signed. They both got signed in the free agent market last year.
All right, I get it. It was a bad draft pick by me. I get it. Thank you. All right, I'm going to regroup. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll do the top 3 on our top 5 tight ends list. We'll be back right after this. All right, guys, 2 down, 3 to go. Next guy up, Rick has him ranked 3rd. Pete had him ranked 3rd. Leger had him 5th, and I had him 2nd. So, Leger, we'll start with you. Dalton Kincaid, tight end out of Utah. Only got a chance to play because of injury. He was a transfer, but when he played, my man took over. Now, one of the things Rick talks about in general, and we've talked about with Jalen Hyatt in the past, is what do we make of 1-year productivity guys? And part of me is like, well, they took advantage of the opportunity. And Rick will say, well, why didn't they take advantage of that opportunity previous to that? So
Dalton Rick Kincaid, be on the same wavelength.
So let me say this, Leger, and then you go. Dalton Kincaid ain't blocking nobody. But
soul.
Offensively, he's a playmaker down the field. Go.
Yeah, so that's before I go, I want to ask Rick this question, right? So, and you're in the draft room, right? And Ryan, you teed that up perfectly. I want to give you your kudos for that, right? Kincaid wasn't the guy. Keithy was the guy, right? Yep. Keithy goes down. Kincaid takes advantage of it. So when you're in those war rooms, like where do you take that into consideration as far as, one, to Ryan's point, he took advantage of his opportunity when he got it, but we don't see the overall production because he wasn't the guy until the guy got hurt.
Right. And those are the things that you're going to discuss. And the question becomes, is it an anomaly where, hey, he just did it? Or if he was able to do that against USC, he should be able to do that, continue to do that because he's shown he can do it. So you'll go back and forth, especially with the tight end coach, with the offensive coordinator and the scouts, and kind of go back and forth. Where I always listened a lot was, well, let's take this guy and let's use him to whatever his strength is, because his strength's not a blocker. Although I'll disagree. I think he gave some effort in space.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
It was bad though.
Well, at least he gave effort. We gave the other guy credit for effort. I will give
that Florida game. My goodness.
Yeah. Now, if you're going to ask him to be a traditional Y and block at the line of scrimmage, I wouldn't do that with this dude. But I think this guy does have enough athleticism. Problem is, he hasn't been able to do anything because I think he has those back fractures. So
Right.
if he would have came out in the combine and blew up the combine, let's say he ran 4.5 at his size, then you would feel a lot better about it. But you've got a 1 year, a little bit like a 1 year wonder. You got a guy with whatever the doctors say on his back situation, if that's significant or not. And he hasn't done anything since the season. So those are some red flags that you're definitely going to be concerned about when you're going through these draft meetings.
So yeah, I think that's
go ahead. Right? Go ahead, Jose. No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what concerns me, right? And that's why I had him 5th on this list. We saw the production, but it was 1 year. Keithy gets hurt, and that's why the production happened. Now, versus USC, like the best player on the field. Now, to your point, Rick, are we going to see that in the league? Is that who is he going to be going forward? And then we talked about it. He's a liability blocking, right? And then the concerns, especially that back, that's nerve-wracking to any scout and GM. You don't know how significant the back injury is. I believe he's a little bit older too.
Yep.
So when you talk about guys on this list, and we talked about this earlier, Rick, with a class being this deep, do you take a chance on taking a Dalton Kincaid in the first round when you know there's so many other good tight ends and they're younger and they might have a higher upside than him?
So you're saying in a draft meeting, if I'm listening to you correct, that you don't want to take an old tight end with a broken back that doesn't block.
I mean, let's put this into perspective, right? The two teams that were in the NFC Championship game last year both have 2 tight ends that can catch, but they also do what? Block really well. We saw the Eagles with their physical run game. Even the Chiefs last year, and Travis Kelce, again, isn't the best blocker, but at least he's willing to do it. Kincaid, like you said, he may give some effort, but it just looks bad. I saw safeties press him at the line of scrimmage. He couldn't get off. I saw safety blitz knock him on his back. So, I mean, that concerns me for a guy that's that big that you don't give even a little bit more grunt in the blocking game. Now, again, pass catching, he's elite at doing that. But I do have concerns because before Keithy got hurt, he wasn't the guy. He became the guy after the number 1 tight end got hurt.
So Dalton Kincaid, tight end out of Utah, 6'3" and 5'8", 246 at the combine. He'll be 24 in October. So to what you were saying, Lee, he is a little older. I'll give you the comp, and you can whatever. I don't care at this point. Dennis Pitta.
You just want to get this podcast over with.
That's actually a really good comp, right?
Yeah, Dennis Pitta. What do you think of that, Rick?
That's okay.
Comp.
That's okay.
How about the kid that came out of UCLA last year?
Dulcich.
Yeah.
Greg Dulcich.
By the way, my comp for Greg Dulcich is Luke Musgrave, only because they both had mustaches. I made fun of both mustaches, and both guys did not think it was funny. So
that's funny.
Dulcich is a good one.
It's not funny. Don't tell him he's funny because he's really not.
That's my line when people tell you you're funny. So assuming, and this is a big assumption, don't want to do this in the draft room, I get all that, but assuming that Dalton Kincaid, the tight end of Utah, is healthy, I think, again, late first, early day 2. Now, if the medicals come back, and Rick, this is the time of year where you get those medicals. We talked to your guy, Eric Sugarman, about this, the former Vikings trainer and head of medicine. This is when all that information gets dumped into the robot that gives you an idea of which direction you should go. So that's something that teams will have to sort through with Dalton Kincaid and his back. All right, number 2 on the list of our top 5 tight ends. Rick, you have him second. Leger has him second. I had him third. And old Pete, once again, not here to defend himself, had him 5th, and I can only guess because he wants him to play tackle.
That's probably what it is.
It is 100%. So I'm talking about Darnell Washington, tight end, out of Georgia, 6'6" and some change, almost 6'7", 265. And he is, Leger, a long strider. He's not twitchy, but that's not his thing. He is the best blocking tight end in this draft class. And if you guys disagree, let me know. And I think the ceiling is enormous. Like, he has a lot of room for growth.
Yeah, Ryan, when you have a chance to draft an alien, you do it. That's what Darnell Washington is. He's an alien. He's not human. And if he didn't have Brock Bauer on his team, I believe he would have been a consensus All-American, to be honest with you. I mean, we saw at the combine the soft hands for a guy that big, coming up with one-handed catches. We've seen him leap over guys, and we talked about the blocking aspect. It's like having a 6 offensive lineman, right? This guy is a guy that can hit and move. He can line in line. They split him out as a receiver sometimes and threw him fade balls. I think he can stretch the field down the seams on teams. He did that a lot at Georgia. And then even they motioned him in the backfield and had him as a lead blocker. So it shows athletic ability. So for a guy that big to have that type of stride and be athletic in open space and be able to wiggle at that size, to me, like Michael, and we'll talk about Michael Mayer next, but Darnell Washington, we don't even know what his ceiling is because he's not a human being.
So Rick, Darnell Washington, tight end out of Georgia, 6'6" and 5'8", 264, 11-inch hands, 34 3/8-inch arms, 4'6", 440. If you're in the draft room and you're looking for a tight end and he's not polished, and we have these other tight ends in this draft class, how seriously are you considering him?
I put him up there because of the same things that Ledger had said, but I'm going to ask you this question here and ask if it's a concern. Reportedly, and I don't have confirmation on this, but if I had scouts, I would ask, what did he play at and what is his weight history through his time in Georgia? So that 264 or whatever, that may be the only time he's ever weighed that in his entire life because he was getting ready for the combine.
So he weighed more or less?
I think some people I have heard on the rumors that played 280 plus during the season. So,
but Rick, let me ask you this: if he played,
I didn't finish my point.
Sorry, go ahead.
See how it is, how hard it is working with a guy that you're trying to. You got a great point you want to make, and then all of a sudden he cuts you off at the knees.
Go ahead, go. You made a good point. Keep going.
So when he shows up at the first rookie mini camp, or when he shows up to training camp, are you getting the 264 version? Or are you getting the 280 plus version? Because I don't think he'll ever run that at 280 plus what he ran at the combine at 264. So that would be something that I would ask in a draft room.
Okay, so let me ask this question, Lijay, and either you or Rick can answer it. Let's say he plays at 284 or whatever, that we saw him dominate at times in Georgia.
Yeah.
Let's say he runs a 4.75, which is what Hawkinson ran in great shape at the combine. Is that a problem?
I don't think it is. And to Rick's point, I heard most of the season he was around 270, 275.
Okay.
And Rick knows this. Everybody drops weight at the combine. Well, unless you're a quarterback from Alabama, you try to put on weight, right? But mostly everybody drops weight. I mean, that was the question for Jordan Davis last year, right? Like, what guy are you going to get? Are you going to get the guy that showed up at the combine? Or are you going to get the guy that we saw on tape sometimes that was tired after 3 or 4 plays? So, I mean, that's what you got to do your due diligence for, right, Rick? And that's what you talk about, meeting with the guys, meeting with the staff, the coaching staff at Georgia, meeting with people, other players on the team. But I think to your point, right, even if he was 280, he still moved really well at 280 as far as attacking down the seam. And then we saw what he was as a blocker, right? Like, literally, I talked about this, like having an extra offensive lineman in there. And even at 280, they lined him up in the backfield. They used him on split zones going across the formation. They used him as a lead blocker on lead plays. So, I mean, again, is it concerning a little bit? Because you're talking about 20 pounds difference. But if he's in that 270, 275 range, I'm not mad.
All right, let me just ask you this. When you guys watch the tape on him and we look at play speed, and would you have estimated him at what he ran in the 40? No, I would have bet my house, although I only have half a house after the hurricane.
Here we go.
So
no, he doesn't look like a 4.64 guy.
I don't think anybody would have said he ran 4.6.
Because
I would have put him in a 4.8, 4.9 range off what I saw on tape.
He's a build-up speed guy. He's not twitchy off the line, and he's got long legs, so it takes him a while to get going. But once he gets going, he's gone. But I know what you're saying, and that's a good point, Rick, that we haven't talked about. Like, you do lose all this weight, and you burn a 4.64, and that's the last time we're going to see 265.
He'll never run another 40 for the rest of his life.
Ever. So it doesn't matter. Do you guys remember what Jelani Woods ran last year?
Did he run?
I don't know. That was my freak comparison, though, when we were making comparison.
Well, I mean, because he's a build-up guy, too, and I feel like the coach didn't use him as well as they should have. And we saw in certain games him be an issue down the seam. And I think that's what
4.61, Lijay.
So he ran fast, too. But it didn't look like that on film. It didn't like he ran a 4.61. So that's actually a pretty good comparison. I mean,
there you go.
Obviously, he's not as good a blocker as Washington. Washington's a way better blocker than Woods.
Jelani never lined up to block. They always put him in that spread offense at Liberty.
So Jelani Woods is tight end from UVA. He was injured for most of the year last year, too. So the second
UVA that transferred to Liberty and played his last year at Liberty.
Are you sure?
No, he played at UVA.
Oh, he played at UVA. I'm sorry. I was thinking, my apologies. Yep.
Well, mark the date, Thomas. We got an apology from Rick to me, so I will take that. All right, let's go to number one.
Before we go to number one, I would love to
hear
hear your guys' comparisons.
Oh, so Rick asked Darnell this at the combine, and I actually don't like. I don't hate the Jelani Woods one, but he said that the obvious one was Mercedes Lewis because there are a few guys that were that size.
I think it's a decent comparison. Martellus Bennett was my comparison. For him.
That's a good one.
Like people don't understand how
this was pretty athletic and twitchy.
Exactly. People didn't understand how good an athlete he was in open space, but then also how dominant a blocker he was.
Yep.
Right.
Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Yep.
They took him in the second round. It was my class. No, they took him in the second round, and they had Witten still there. But this dude was a dominant blocker. And I think the Martellus Bennett comparison is a little bit better than the Mercedes Lewis. I think the Mercedes Lewis one's just people being lazy.
I'll let you tell Darnell that one, but I don't disagree with you. I ain't telling Darnell that. I don't know if you saw the picture I took with him. It looked like I was his son going to kindergarten.
Yeah, he walked up on the stage and Ryan at the combine, and Ryan goes, "Geez, you must be at least 6'3". I was like, I almost fell off my chair.
I know he was hot about that. Did you guys see the Twitter picture he put up? I forgot who it was. It might have been with the tight end, Dylan, what's his name for Purdue? Because I think he's really tall.
Payne Durham.
Right? Yeah, and supposedly Washington, they were like eye level, but they gave him like an extra inch over Darnell Washington. He was mad about it.
Oh, please. And just so we're clear, I didn't say Darnell was 6'3". I asked Miles Murphy that, who's 6'4" and 5/8. So I was off by an inch and 5/8, Rick.
The guy hit his head coming up on the lights hanging up on top of the rafters. And he's, oh, yeah, you got to be at least 6'3".
I've heard this story so many times. Quit laughing. All right, let's get to number one so I can kick both you guys out of here.
I like having guests, Ryan. This is fun.
I know. It is actually fun. It's nice to mix it up a little bit. And this is the first time in all the picks we've talked about, both 5 tight ends and all the offensive linemen, we agree. Number one, Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. And I'll just give you the pre-comp before we get into it. I had, and this may be your comp, actually, Rick, so I'm stealing it. Jason Witten, is that yours?
Yeah, I had that. I had a little bit Dalton Schultz, too.
Yep.
Was a little bit of a comparison. I was kind of going back and forth, but in that realm.
And I went old school Todd Heap. They're similar frame. Todd might be a little bit more athletic, but he was a really good player, man. But Michael Mayer, he can play in the slot, but he's one of the few guys you can put in line and he's going to block someone that's not named Darnell. I thought he was incredibly important to that offense, given how bad the quarterback play was. And he made play after play after play. We talked to him. He's a solid dude through and through, cares about football, all those things that you like. Lige, why do you have Michael Mayer, tight end Notre Dame, number one?
Yeah, I'm surprised that there's, I mean, again, mock drafts are mock drafts. I'm so surprised that people were considering not putting him at number one. I mean, he's a complete tight end as far as athletic ability to spread out, play in line. Also, he's a very savvy route runner, more athletic than people actually give him credit for. I think he still ran in the 4.74, maybe
4.70.
4.70. So that's plenty of speed. You see it at times jump over defenders, right? Shows you the athletic ability in open space. And one thing he really wanted to work on, and you talked about this, Ryan, was being more of a dominant blocker this year. And you could see it on tape, right? He cared about it. It meant something to him as far as him and his run blocking ability. And you talked about it, as bad as that quarterback play was at Notre Dame, right? For him to be able to have the production that he had, and knowing that the ball is probably not going to be where it needs to be, I think it's not even up for discussion that this guy is the number one tight end. He's actually, besides Washington, the only tight end I would consider going in the first round.
So, Rick, let me ask you, because you had a history of drafting really good tight ends. Is this a position that's easier to identify, or was it you were just good at finding tight ends?
No, my staff was good at finding tight ends. I was just like on the show. All I sit here is do comic relief for everybody. Yeah. I like this player. I think he's the most complete tight end in the draft because he can do everything. I would disagree. I think he is a sneaky athlete, but he's not going to show up in shorts at the combine, running around and doing the athletic stuff as much. He's a better, in my opinion, a better football player than he is athlete. So if you're going to take him to the Olympics, he's going to be not going to medal, but if you're going to put him on a football field, he's going to medal. And I thought he can do he can do anything you want. He's going to be a day one starter wherever he goes. He's going to make as many contested catches as I can remember any tight end making. But I think at the NFL, because he's not 4'5" or because he's not this, he's going to be in contested situations, but he has proven he can come through and make those type of catches. My biggest knock on him, and Ryan, I'll let you talk about it, was go ahead.
He was eating a hot dog during the bowl game on the sidelines while his team was competing, and Rick hated the fact that he wasn't competing with his teammates. He's stuffing a hot dog in his mouth. So two things.
Doing interview with ESPN.
Two things. Rick wants you to compete, and he also hates hot dogs. That's what I took away from that story.
he hates guys that don't play in bowl games.
Oh, Lord have mercy. That's why he loves those Alabama kids, in addition to Pete will tell you some other things. But look, and I give Rick credit. Like he said to Bryce Young, he said, why aren't you working out at the combine? Because you played the bowl game. Why aren't you working out? And, Bryce had an answer. But he put that question to Will Levis, who had a bunch of tough questions to answer. And I get it. My thing is, and I'm a little more progressive than Rick about this, I don't want these kids getting hurt and losing out on millions. But when you're having to explain to an owner why you drafted a kid that ain't trying, then that's a different conversation than some guy like me.
There was a little receiver out of Alabama that blew his ACL out, and I understand it was in the playoffs.
Yeah,
still got drafted in 12th, and he had a pretty nice insurance policy that made sure he was covered. So
yeah,
I'm just saying, when you talk to the Alabama kids, and we interviewed them all, and I'm not being biased one way, shape, or form, but they say they want to go out there and compete with their brothers one last time, because that's the last time in their life that they'll be together.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't even been mad if Bryce didn't play. It wasn't just one receiver; it was both receivers that went down with major injuries. Let's not forget the Texans took another receiver from Alabama in the 3rd round who tore his ACL too.
Oh, right, John Mechie.
Yeah. So
but Mechie was more. He had the cancer too, didn't he?
Well, that happened this year, though.
I think, right?
Yeah, it happened after. Yeah. So if I'm Bryce, I probably wouldn't have played in that. And I know, Rick, you hate that, but I wouldn't have played in that bowl game for what?
But Bryce Young played in that bowl game, and maybe after the first 2 series had the best game of his season, and that put him up to potentially the #1 overall draft.
No, that's a great point. I was watching that game a few weeks ago, and I was like, I forgot some of the throws he made in that game.
Some of the anticipation throws in that game.
Oh, Lord have mercy. So before we get out of here, and you talked about the level of athleticism in this group of tight ends, Rick, you explain to people what this number means, and you'll be explaining to me too, because I can't keep up with these. So the 3-cone drill for Michael Mayer at his pro day was 7.26. What does that mean to you?
Well, I just got to compare it. But basically, it's measuring their ability to change direction, turn, and bend, and accelerate out of the turn. So those are things that you're probably going to try to anticipate the acceleration coming into and out of his routes. And if he has the burst and how he changes direction, like an option route underneath, or any type of angle routes or things like that. So you're trying to compare measurables that way in that 3-cone. In fact, there was an old scout called CO Brigado who came up with that drill, and it wasn't used back in 1990 at my first combine, when it was just scouts and coaches watching guys work out in Indianapolis. It was actually implemented like in the mid 90s. I can't remember the exact date, and it became one of the best measuring sticks for change of direction and acceleration.
Well, let me give you some context. So 7.26 was the 3-cone drill time for Michael Mayer. Our guy Sam LaPorta ran a 6.91 in the 3-cone drill. So that gives you some idea that he's
get in and out of his cuts.
Yeah, he can.
And then there's a receiver at Ohio State that I think also blew that away.
Jackson Smith did really well in the 3-cone.